A meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Putin will definitely take place, insists Donald Trump. Moreover, the US president allows that the deadline for his ultimatum to the Kremlin may expire sooner than in 50 days. If Moscow does not agree to a ceasefire, sanctions will follow. The Kremlin keeps saying it's impossible, that the timing isn't right. Meanwhile, shelling of Ukrainian cities continues. Formally, there is dialogue in Istanbul, but in reality, it's Russian terror against Ukraine's civilian population. 2 weeks since the ultimatum, the same old manipulation tactics, stalling for time, and not a hint of a real ceasefire. Let's take a look at how Washington is responding to this kind of game from the Kremlin. Calls for Putin to end the war are coming from all sides, both Europe and the US. World leaders are writing about it on social media, speaking about it on TV, and raising it at international forums. At a UN Security Council meeting, the US representative directly addressed Moscow, demanding an end to the terror against Ukrainians. Dorothy Shea stated, "The Russian army continues to kill Ukrainian civilians. Russian drones and missiles are targeting schools, playgrounds, residential buildings, and nursing homes. This must be stopped."
There is no military solution to this conflict. On July 14th, the President of the United States demanded that Putin agree to a peace agreement within 50 days. If Russia does not agree to cease its attacks within this period, the United States is prepared to take further measures. Furthermore, we once again call on all countries, including China, to stop exporting dual-use goods to Russia that contribute to the development of Russia's military industry and enable it to carry out drone and missile attacks on Ukraine.
The initiative for new sanctions against Russia is a joint decision of the Senate and the President of the United States of America. But despite close contact with lawmakers, Donald Trump wants to reserve the right to impose restrictive measures for himself. The White House noted that the decision to strike at the Kremlin's economy should be a personal one from the Oval Office.
The president has been in very close communication on this issue with his friends in the Senate, especially with Senator Lindsey Graham. But the president has always maintained that he is the commander-in-chief and that he is president for a reason. And from the very beginning, he has taken an active role in this conflict. That's why, when it comes to making any decisions regarding sanctions, the president wants to retain these powers and rights for himself.
Immediately after announcing the deadline to the Kremlin, President Trump reported new arms deliveries to Ukraine, including Patriot missile defense systems. The Kremlin responded predictably. It started talking about being ready for a third round of negotiations in Istanbul. This is Putin's attempt to keep Washington from imposing new sanctions and to prevent the transfer of even deadlier weapons to Kyiv, writes the New York Times. The talks in Turkey did take place, but as expected, they did not bring any significant progress. Russia once again rejected proposals for a ceasefire and still prefers to speak to Ukraine in the language of ultimatums. The only truly significant result was humanitarian. According to the head of the Ukrainian delegation at the Istanbul talks, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov, more than 1,200 people will return home as part of the new exchange. But Kyiv insists Russia must also return the Ukrainian children abducted by Russian occupiers. During the previous round of negotiations, Kyiv handed Moscow an initial list of 339 names of children whom Russian occupiers had illegally taken from the occupied territories of Ukraine. The Russian side provided only partial information for just 20% of the names on the list. Handing over the list in Istanbul is a top priority step for building trust. Unfortunately, as of today, Russia has provided only partial information about less than a fifth of the children from the initial list. Regarding more than 200 children, including those from the Kherson baby home, there has been no response at all. Therefore, Ukraine expects information about the rest of the children listed. Dmytro Lubinets, the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, on Telegram. The cynicism of the Russian negotiators, as always, knows no bounds. Instead of a real dialogue about returning the abducted Ukrainian children, the head of the Russian delegation, Medinsky, unleashed yet another batch of fake news. And the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Golizin even claimed that Russia had given Ukraine a list of 20 Russian children whom they now demand to be returned. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized, the Kremlin, as usual, mirrors everything that comes out of Kyiv. I think this needs to be looked into. We don't have their children. This seems to be some new track they're taking. Honestly, I'm not surprised, because when we talked about Putin's illegitimacy, about how anyone could deal with him. They started using the story about my own illegitimacy, and so on. As soon as we started talking about how they don't retrieve their dead, they began offering us body exchanges. Although before this, on the battlefield, it all happened immediately, calmly, quietly. No one exerted the kind of media pressure that they did. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, at a meeting with journalists, realizing that it was impossible to achieve real progress with such a low-level Russian delegation, Ukraine proposed holding a meeting at the level of the leaders. At the negotiations, in addition to the president of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky and Putin, the participation of the head of the White House and the president of Turkey is also expected.
Priority number 1 is to organize a meeting of the leaders, the presidents. The participation of Presidents Trump and Erdogan would be extremely valuable. We are proposing to the Russian side to hold such a leaders' meeting by the end of August. By agreeing to this proposal, Russia will be able to clearly demonstrate its constructive approach to everyone in the world, including our partners. Ukraine continues to insist on a complete and unconditional ceasefire as a necessary foundation for effective diplomacy.
The direct response to Ukraine's calls for an end to the war has been new terrorist strikes on peaceful cities. Just a few hours after the talks in Istanbul, Russia launched 103 attack drones and 4 cruise missiles at Ukraine. Odessa, Mykolaiv, Sumy, Kharkiv, Donetsk, Cherkasy, and Zaporizhia regions came under attack. In case such a demonstration of Russia's intentions was not enough, Kremlin spokesperson Peskov stated that it would be impossible to hold high-level talks before the end of the summer. According to him, such a meeting should put an end to the war. And I quote, "It is impossible to do that in 30 days." It is obvious that the Kremlin does not want an end just yet. This position is increasingly irritating President Trump, who, judging by all appearances, is losing patience.
U.S. President Donald Trump is focused on peace. What he wants most is to take part in peace agreements that stop wars, prevent wars, and end wars. He has done everything possible to bring the war to an end. I think he is becoming more and more frustrated. Despite having good relations with Vladimir Putin, phone conversations are leading nowhere. So now it's time to take action. And I think the president has made that clear. He is losing patience, losing the desire to keep waiting for the Russian side to do at least something to end this war.
Donald Trump insists his meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky and Putin must take place. When asked by a journalist whether it was possible to impose sanctions on the aggressor country earlier than the date he had indicated, he replied,
"Many times we thought we had already reached agreements, and then Putin comes out and starts launching missiles at some city like Kyiv and kills a lot of people in a nursing home or somewhere else. Bodies are lying right out on the street. And I say, this can't go on. So let's see what comes of this. I'm very disappointed. I'm disappointed in Putin, very disappointed in him. So we'll have to reconsider everything. And I'm shortening those 50 days I gave him to a smaller number, because it seems I already know what's going to happen."
The Kremlin is the only one refusing to move forward. The Turkish Foreign Ministry reported, "We are ready to facilitate a summit of leaders in Istanbul. We are working to create the conditions for this," said Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. The initiative is supported by Kyiv, Washington, and Ankara. Everyone's in favor. Everyone except Putin. In response to the proposal to sit down at the negotiating table, there are massive strikes on Ukrainian cities. Moscow still wants to continue the war, while pretending to be seeking peace. For them, a leaders' meeting is a potential danger, because then the masks will finally be torn off and the unflattering truth will remain. And the Kremlin would very much like to avoid that.